What's going on, everybody? I am so excited about this episode on the podcast. I get to sit down with Dig founder Adam Eskin. Amazing guy, has made waves all over New York and beyond with his incredible food concept, Dig. Check it out. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. I am so fired up today to introduce a good friend of mine, old friend of mine, entrepreneur Adam Eskin. This guy has made a serious splash in the food scene in New York and moving up and down the East Coast. He opened up a company called Dig, now known as Dig, and it's literally just taken the world by storm. There's nobody in New York City that does not eat there and love this place, and this dude happens to be a really cool guy, and I'm super excited to have him on the show.
Thanks,
my man.
Excited to be here, brother.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no doubt.
So Born or Made, just to give you a quick little synopsis of what we do here, it is a podcast where I pose the question, do you think, as a passionate achiever, successful entrepreneur, do you think people of your ilk, similar to you in just life, things that have happened in a positive way, do you think that people like you are born with an innate ability to get to where you're at?
Yeah.
Or do you think it was made over time?
Right.
So it's kind of the nature-nurture.
And where are you coming out so far? You haven't done a bunch of these things.
You know, I think for me, it's I have my own thing that I don't really talk about much till the very end.
All right.
And I'm not going to ask you till the very end what you actually think, but I got to say it's been really 50-50.
Okay.
It's been 50-50.
Yeah.
And I have been truly blown away by some people's responses based on the conversation that we've had.
Yeah.
To hear sort of how people like sum it up at the end, because I think you know, look, it could be a for people that say made, it's obviously very encouraging for anybody who's watching or listening, right? Because it gives everybody this hope that like anybody can do this. Mm-hmm. And I do actually believe that like anybody can do it, but I certainly do believe that there is a yeah. So I
maybe a predisposition.
When you say born, you get it's kind of saying like, well, if you're not born with this, it's going to be real hard. So anyway, so the way I like to get there with my guests is I like to learn about you and your story. I love a great story, and I think human beings in general have been listening to and telling stories for as long as human beings have been on the planet. I think in every community, culture, society around the globe, sitting around a fire and telling stories is what people really sort of love to do. And we're in business, and in our businesses, the goal is really to get people to sit around the fire and have a good time and listen to our story, right? So I'd love you to sort of bring it back to as early as you can remember, and just tell me what it was like growing up in the world of Adam Eskin.
Sure.
In the Northeast, New England.
So let's see. I guess to go way back, I grew up in the South Shore of Massachusetts. I was born in a hospital in a town called Weymouth, and then I grew up in a town called Norwell, and subsequently Marshfield. My mother, she had, when she was growing up, big plans to go off to college and leave the Northeast. She grew up in a town called Lincoln. Her father was in medicine. He was a radiologist at a large, well-known hospital in Massachusetts. And he suddenly passed away of a heart attack unexpectedly. Mm. So she made the decision to stick around, which ended up working out for me because that's how she ultimately met my father, right? They would have never connected had she gone out. But she ended up going to a local school in Massachusetts for undergrad, studied education, and then became an educator for the next 35, 40 some odd years. So she was a teacher in the Norwell public school system, which is what brought our family there. My father, amazing dad, and we can, I think, get into that because that is germane to this, the made part in environment. And, you know, there's what you're born with, but just like what are the experiences you have and how do they really shape you, and how does some of those environmental experiences really do maybe create advantages for some relative to others. But did not graduate from college, you know, has had and held, retired now, but various sales jobs, you know, anything from literally selling used cars to selling records management for an Iron Mountain or something like that, right? And so my mom was a teacher, she was an educator. We came up through the Norwell public school system. And it was really interesting for my brother and I. There's two of us. He's 2 years older. His name's Chris. As we went up through elementary school, we were sort of always dodging her. She was kind of hopping around.
Always Patriot fans?
Always Patriot fans. That one paid off. Goes without saying. Sorry, bud. And so, you know, we went up through the school system. All of my teachers were my mom's closest friends, which was sort of interesting. Growing up, I had a lot of behavioral issues.
Like what?
I just ended up in the principal's office a lot. I'm not really sure what it was, and
So were you like actually in trouble, or were you like the funny guy, just causing, like making a ruckus, or were you like doing like bad shit?
I haven't gone that deep in the therapy sessions yet, you know, and unpacked it. What I think is, it was a combination of, they were all my mother's friends, and so there's just this like young rebellious thing that I had. I've always, for whatever reason, had a problem with authority and have never liked anyone to tell me what to do. Going to the maid thing,
dude.
right? Like, it's just always been that way.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear, right? Hear, hear.
Unfortunately.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
And so, you know, these were her peers, these were her friends. I was always very focused on, I guess, being thorough or doing well. So I have this very vivid memory. When I was in second grade, Sparrow School, this set of classrooms was actually subterranean, so it was like down at the very bottom floor. And you had these like small windows that were up at the top of the classroom. And we were doing cut and paste. And it was, I guess, an axis or a 4-quadrant grid. And you had to, you know, fill in the shapes with your crayons, and then you had to cut the words and then associate whatever the sentence or the phrase was with the particular picture that you were filling in with crayons.
Wow, you really have this fucking memory down.
And I wasn't very good with art or crayons, but it was really important to me that I was thorough and that I did things well. And so I quite literally went up to the teacher, who was my mother's friend, and before I submitted my work, I explained to her exactly what I did, why I chose the colors that I chose, and I wanted to make sure that she didn't somehow misinterpret my work. And she was like...
So can I stop you for a second? So I have an enormous amount of identification with that, but is that something that you feel is still a huge part of your DNA today?
Yeah, you know, I guess I wasn't able to define it back then, but I think anything worth doing is worth doing well, you know, and if you're going to put your time and your energy into it, you know, you should actually care about the outcome. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what's the point? You know,
like, it reminded me, you saying that reminded me so clearly of currently right now me, when I sit with my older son, Finn, and this has been like going on for some time now. He loves those sticker books. Mm-hmm. Those like Marvel sticker books, mm-hmm. Like there's like all the things, and then the stickers are in the middle, and you peel the sticker and you put it on top of the empty space that is the shape of the sticker.
Sure.
And I cannot allow him to show any of that empty space. He has to put the sticker perfectly on, and so he'll put it on, and then I'll be like, no, and he'll rip it off, and he'll put it on. I'm like, Finn, take your time. But it's very.
Well,
made me think of that.
We can commiserate, right? Because I have a 2-year and 4-month-old William, and it's a really interesting exercise doing coloring book with him. Or you know, it's the I forget what you call it, right? But it sticks on, sticks off, same thing. We're not up to shapes, but you'll have a kitchen landscape, and like, where does the refrigerator go? And it's very tempting to correct him or have him peel it off and do it again. And I'm trying to demonstrate some restraint because I don't think it's appropriate, at least for me, at 2 years and 4 months to be, it's like, maybe we're not there yet, But I think about that a lot, which is, what is the role I'm supposed to be playing and how much do I just need to let him be him versus kind of like.
I was totally there 2 years and 4 months. I was just like, no, dude, that's not good.
All right, well, that's one way to do it.
Hey, it's like, it's one of those things that just, but anyway, I feel like that level of, like you said, if you're going to do something, do it well.
Yeah.
I think that having that at such an age, second grade, that potentially wasn't sort of instilled in you at home is unique.
Mm-hmm. The mom being friends with all these people, that must have been a thing because she was in the school system and I would see her in the hallway. But I guess I found at an early age that, whatever I was doing or repairing mattered. I also discovered, and I'm not sure where this came from, I've always been very competitive, whether it was athletics or academics. And the behavioral thing, I don't know if it was just sort of lashing out against authority, but that, my how I would be evaluated in school, I tended to do okay on the actual work itself. But all of the sections of the report card associated with behavior, going back to that grading system, were always N, which was non-satisfactory.
I remember the N.
Yeah, the N. It's like, why are all those N's on there?
So in terms of your academics grades, were you like an A student always, or were you like an 85 B student?
I was pretty regularly an A student,
Okay.
growing up. My mom was a teacher, so I think I also had that, It wasn't just at school, it was also at home. And I'm not going to pass judgment or assess, but I'd imagine that it was also important to her for her children to do well in her school system. Yeah. But I also spent a lot of time. It wasn't like things always came naturally, but if I had to spend more time filling in the color book, I just spent more time on it.
Got it. How do you feel when you color in with your son? Like when he colors outside of the lines?
Well, there's a lot of dissonance because, like I said before, he's only 2, and I have this idea in my head of the parents that I don't want to be, and I don't want to be this sort of insane, like micromanagey. So I want to give him as much as I can to help him along the way, but I ultimately feel like our ability to discover things ourselves, and really learn from our own experiences, at least that's been that way for me. You can tell me 50 times or till you're blue in the face, but I've always been one of those people that just needs to learn for myself, and I'm happy to have things break or not work out, but I feel like those are some of the best lessons learned, and if I'm oversteering him or over-guiding him on any one of those things, I feel like that's like a little, in my mind at least, that feels a little too safety netty for me.
So you know what's interesting, and now I love this conversation, even though it's sort of gone off on a little thing, but we're both in the same business. Mm-hmm. And in the restaurant business, my experience is the devil is in the details. Mm-hmm. And when the founder, the entrepreneur, operator is focused on the details, typically people that are within the industry or pay attention, that are consumers, really appreciate that. Yep. And for me, I just always have been a creative person. Yeah. And so details when it comes to creative for me, and that could be anything from, what it feels like when you walk into the bathroom based on where the soap dispenser is placed and where the hand, where, like, how, like, even logistics in creative, like the way a room feels, but also like if you put the hand dryer next to the sink, every time somebody gets a little too close to it, it's going to go off and scare the shit out of people. So like those little tiny details that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. And it's so interesting that with my sons, when anything creative, even I'm an athlete, but anything creative for whatever reason, I definitely do steer them. I definitely do try to make it a point. Not try to make it a point, but I am more passionate about pointing out things like I am in my business. Yeah. that are not like right.
Yeah.
When it comes to sports or really anything else, I think, and I'm not nearly as sort of
prescriptive. Yeah.
But that's how I am in life too.
Yeah.
Like the shit that I'm really passionate about is the stuff that I really care about. And it sounds like you had somewhat of a similar situation in second grade.
Yeah.
All right, so keep going.
So went through the school system. Like I said, had a bunch of time in the principal's office, more just for, I think, just defiant acts than necessarily causing real trouble. Was doing fairly well academically, enjoyed school, was playing lots of sports. So started playing hockey when I was in kindergarten, right? A real Northeasterner, a real Bostonian. Just came home one day with a flyer that they were handing out at school. It was either on the bulletin board or whatever. And at the time, my brother wasn't playing. He was 2 years older. My dad historically didn't have a particular interest in hockey, and so it was the Learn to Skate program. And you threw some skates on, and you had an egg crate, and we set out to the hockey rink. So it was soccer, it was hockey, it was baseball, it was all the sports that we were playing back in those days. But one thing that I think is worth pointing out in the context of this type of conversation, I had an incredible support system. I mean, I quite literally, when I talk about my family and my parents, I get choked up nearly every time. So, going back to my point, my mom was a teacher and an educator, very, very committed to her profession, really cared about learning, really cared about students, and was a very involved member of the educational community in the Norwell Public School system. So she was a teacher, but she had 5 other hats. And so it was always after-school activities, and it was, parent-teacher this, and, groups and organizations.
Did you guys have dinner together every night?
We did. So to that point, my mom still got home at a reasonable time, but because my dad was always in sales, he had an unbelievably flexible schedule. And so, while I think it's become much more equal these days, back then, I think, this is, I guess, in the 80s, right? Gender roles were more defined, in terms of home and work. And in my family, no knock to my mom, I loved her dearly, but she was definitely the person that was much more committed to her career. And what my father cared about was they both cared, of course, but my father really cared about raising us 2 boys. And I think he knew early on, because school was never really his thing, and while he enjoyed sales, it wasn't like he woke up every day just wanting to sell stuff. For him it was just a job, and a livelihood and a way to, make some money to support the family. His number one priority was raising us kids. So whether it was hockey practice, soccer practice, baseball practice, rugby starting in high school, I don't think my dad ever missed a practice, a game, and anything in my entire life. Not one.
Wow.
He made a brown bag lunch for us every morning, right? Wasn't my mom, was my dad. Walked or brought us to the bus or took us to school. I mean, literally whatever it took. So I get choked up.
Dude is the man.
I mean, he's the man. We are homies.
Still the man.
Less so now because life has gotten so busy, but up until only a few years ago, we spoke nearly every day. Over the phone.
It's cool, dude.
It's just amazing. Just a total role model. And so bringing it back full circle to, being a parent now, that's my model. And number one, it's a lot to live up to. Number two, it's what I gathered from it was I felt unbelievably supportive because he was available and he was there. Never, ever, ever told me what to do, ever. When it came to academics, it was quite the opposite. Sort of this interesting dichotomy with my mother, who was an educator. I'd be the one who was got to stay up late to get the work done. He was like, dude, you just need your rest. You need to take care of your body, take care of your health. It's important that you get sleep. And so there was never any judgment. I wanted to play hockey. He didn't have a relationship with hockey, but hockey it was. Yeah. And then off we went. And so he never really forced me, and they never really forced me into anything. It was just whatever motivated us, whatever we wanted to do, whatever we were interested in, they were going to do their best. when it came to going to college, whatever it was, if I could get in that I wanted to go to, they were going to figure out a way, second mortgage, loans, this and that to get us there. And to go to the place that I went to and to have graduated only with $10,000 of debt with a teacher and a salesperson for parents is like unbelievable. They sort of gave us everything.
You talk about choking you up. Like I'm like getting choked up because it just sounds like you had such a supportive, loving household.
It was, and so like knowing now I have a lot of close friends. The majority of the dearest friends that I have today actually didn't have that. That's been my experience with at least those that are close to me. So I really recognized how unique and special that is. And so going back to this idea of how did it come about, was it their day one or not? I think it's impossible not to attest some of what I've been able to either enjoy or achieve from a prosperity perspective in life, not to attribute that and to that to be a testament to like how they raised us and how available they were,
Well, and let's just talk about like outside of the support system at home and the athletics, like was there ever moments in your adolescence, let's just jump to adolescence, where you felt like thinking entrepreneurially, was there ever moments where you were like, I'd love to figure out a way to make money?
Yeah. It's really interesting. So in fits and starts, but I wasn't the full-fledged, been an entrepreneur since day one, sort of business entrepreneurship hacking until later in life. So I think what I was seeking was independence, and it goes back to this idea of I never wanted anybody to tell me what to do. I think part of that was because my parents didn't actually tell me what to do, and maybe they spoiled me in that regard. And so I thought about making money as a means to independence, more so than necessarily in the early days wanting to build something. That wasn't really part of my fabric. So got a paper out at an early age, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but on rainy days, my dad was like, "You're not taking your bike. Hop in the car, and I'm going to drive you around." It was like that, man. So I did those things.
Love that guy.
Yeah, it's just legend.
I gotta meet your pops.
He'd love to meet you. He's a really good guy.
Wow.
So did the paper route stuff, bus tables at TK O'Malley's. I mean, it's not like we grew up with lots of money. That wasn't the thing, but that's not the thing. It wasn't the money, it was the support. And we'll find a way. If you want to do something, we're here to support you. So bussing tables at restaurants in Situate Harbor.
Was your mom, was she strict? Like, did she structure everything? And your dad was there as a support system really for her structure?
I wouldn't label it as strict. I mean, she was a teacher, and she was a particular type of teacher. She was one of the teachers where when Mrs. Eskin said so, you listened. Right? She wasn't just like, I'm just going to be your pal. It was about being there as an educator to educate and to help kids come along and to grow up. And so she definitely brought some of that home, but we also had an unbelievable relationship. I mean, another vivid memory, I was actually using this as an example, talking with one of our chefs very recently about menu development and creative in general, and this idea of showing restraint, as actually being harder than adding something. She used to do sort of informal fashion shows, and what I mean by that was like she'd get dressed in the morning like I was up and ready and getting ready for school, and she'd be like, "Adam, what do you think about my outfit?" And I'd like give her some feedback, and like often it was like, "Oh, just like take that one thing away."
Definitely don't give your wife any feedback.
No, man. I've learned the hard way. No, it's actually quite the opposite. My wife does, I think, the wardrobing and the dressing for both of us, and where that's landed us is mostly white, black, and grays. But yeah, no, she definitely erred on the more structured side if the two were to play roles, but she wasn't a finger wagger. One of the things in thinking back, that you're jogging a lot, and in thinking about coming in today. So you ride motorcycles, right? I grew up riding dirt bikes, but to the dismay of my parents, particularly my father, because he was very concerned about my safety at all times and our safety. But but it was just always something that I wanted to do, and it was like no one's gonna get in my way. So paper out, save up enough money. First dirt bike I bought was an RT 100, 100cc dirt bike. Flipped over a couple times, dumped it, but made my way through some street legal enduros, and then ultimately had a crotch rocket before I actually got into a real accident, and then Dad put the kibosh on that one real fast. But I in Massachusetts, I don't know what it's like for you, you got your learner's permit, of course, before you got your license. And in motorcycle land, learner's permit was you ride alone, not with a passenger. So the day I turned 16, I got my motorcycle learner's permit, and I was riding a used red, purple, and silver Suzuki Katana 600 to Situate, Mass, to go to my table busing job. And so there was lots of things that my parents, when I said I want to do that from like a safety and my well-being, were like, no chance in hell. I just was really not receptive to no. And so I don't know if you call it manipulation at a young age. I just like figured out an angle, and I just like wouldn't give up until at some point they were like, this kid is not going to stop torturing us until we just let him have a motorcycle. So I don't know where that came from, but there was a lot of that growing up.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're 16, you're playing sports, you're riding motorcycles. Really sort of like building business is not a priority or not something that's really sort of like infiltrated your mindset yet. Was academics, like you were focused on it?
I was, because I think that did come from my mother. I believed that was the path. Like if you got that right, that would open up a lot of doors.
So you did well in high school, and then you went to college?
Yes.
And where'd you go to college?
Brown University.
Awesome school.
Went down to Providence, Rhode Island.
So you went to college at Brown, and what was it like there?
It was incredible. From the first day we visited, it was like one of those, just like the sea parting, beautiful day, amazing, college campus, big, sort of green archways, that whole thing. It was within an hour of home, I had played rugby in high school, so they had a great rugby program. It was accessible so that my parents could visit, my dad could visit, and sort of watch the games and the matches.
Were you in high school, were you like a star athlete?
No, not star. What I carried through to high school was hockey, and then I added rugby.
What position did you play hockey?
Defense. I was a defenseman.
Me too.
Yeah. Really?
I played ice hockey for a long time in the city.
I'm not sure we ever talked about that.
Yeah.
Really?
Brian Leach was my fucking idol.
No shit, man.
Yeah. I was a New York Ranger hardcore fan.
Ray Bork, Cam Neely.
Yeah. Big defenseman. I was and I'm a little guy, so I was like the hip check king.
Yeah.
Right at the blue line.
Yeah.
Dig my skate in.
I could always skate backwards better than I could skate forwards. So
I was a good backwards skater too. I love defense.
It was a fun position, right? Mm-hmm. It got to a point where it became clear that it just wasn't going to get me there. Like that wasn't going to be my thing. I could play and hang a bit, but wasn't going to be what was going to get me. Over the long haul. So I really focused on academics and really studied hard. Yeah.
So you're at Brown, and what did you study there? What were you in school for?
So I started with the major was business economics. So it was like economics with a tint of.
Like, what did you want to do at that stage? Did you have any idea of like what the goal was?
I had no idea.
So you're a fucking made guy. You're made. You're fucking made, because I just see like, and it's beautiful for me to see and be able to like pick this out, because and I love it for the show, because I'm imagining you're gonna say made. I'm actually projecting my vision here. It could be born.
Yeah.
But you are one of the most successful entrepreneurs I know. There's no doubt about it. Right, like you just are. And by the way, I think your brand is, like, I'm so impressed with what you've done with your brand, and because I remember the day you bought the pump.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we were there at the same time.
We were, man.
Yeah. And so I just, like what you've done is spectacular, and most people know, and like the fact that you've gotten to where you are. Without when I was a kid, I was I was selling everything.
Were you?
Oh, everything. I mean, I grew up in New York City, and like when I got bored of a toy in 2nd, 3rd grade, I went downstairs, laid down a blanket, and sold all my toys.
Really?
Full blown, like 100%.
Wow.
I would go to the comic book store, the store Alex's MVP. They had like a $5 grab bag, comic envelope. They would put like 5 comics in an envelope, and it was $5, and sometimes you get like an amazing comic.
Yeah.
And so I would go in there with some money, and I'd buy like 5 grab bags, and if the stuff that I didn't like, I would stand in front of the comic book store and try to sell them to the people walking in and out. Like I was just constantly trying to sell. Hustling from the day one.
Yeah.
And so like the beauty of this conversation is that you were not.
Nope.
And you arguably or have made one of the largest, like anytime I read something online about things happening in the restaurant world, digging is there. And so it's just,
Thank you.
So I guess what I'm saying is that it's just beautiful to be able to see that, like, no, you don't, not everybody is this like, die hard, like making business decisions at like 2 years old.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So all right, so you're in Brown and you don't know exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
And you're tell me.
So I'm having a great time. Felt very fortunate to have the opportunity to go there, for my parents to support me. My brother was actually going to school right around the corner. He was also in Rhode Island, so that was pretty amazing. He was 2 years ahead of me, but we were 30 minutes away. So we had that connection. So family was always close. I was playing rugby. I joined a fraternity. That was an incredible experience for me. So I had a lot of anxiety going to college in terms of who I was going to be paired with. My first roommate, and that dates back to some stuff I went through in junior high, which was I guess a defining moment in my life that sent me off to an all-boys Catholic school initially to play hockey, or that was the auspices under which I had sort of told that. But really what happened was I grew up in this neighborhood. It was a great neighborhood. It was a cul-de-sac. It was a dead end. A group of us, we were friends early days, same grade, a bunch of boys running around, always playing football, baseball in one of our yards. And I remember in 7th grade, a new kid joined the neighborhood. He moved from wherever he came from. And for whatever reason, he picked me out as the one that he didn't like. And I don't know at that age, I mean, we're all kids, who knows? But it felt like there was sort of a desire I learned to maybe just sort of take my spot. And so we always used to go to this one kid's house to play sports after school because he had the biggest front yard and it was flat and it was nice.
This new kid?
No, one of the OG kids. And this new kid was a part of that group now. And I was told we weren't playing that day. I was like, okay, I just figured we weren't playing. And I was in my kitchen, which was on the back side of our house, and it had windows facing the backyard. And then there was a tree line and then woods. And I looked up, it was the sink, and I saw all my friends there in my backyard. And then I realized they had eggs, and they started throwing eggs in my house, which I didn't understand. And so then I went and I got my BB gun. I pulled it out, and I shot the kid with my BB gun.
The kid?
The new kid, yeah. And the police showed up, and from that day on, junior high was really challenging. Went from feeling like, life was grand to being very, very, very alone. And so...
Because the whole crew...
Gonzo.
Wow.
Dropped.
Just from that one thing.
Yeah, in a day. So I think I reflect on that has definitely shaped probably a lot of who I am, because it's at a year in 7th grade. You're a young kid, and I think those are just very defining years. And so that.
Did you ever rekindle with the guys?
No. So what I did was I ran away. At the time, our public school system did not have a hockey program, and because we had now been doing it for so many years as a family, hockey was really important to me. It was really important to my father. And so there was this background conversation, which was, do you really want to stay in the public school system? Should we send you somewhere so you can play hockey? Because there is no hockey program here, although they ultimately launched one. And So I jumped on that bandwagon, but that wasn't really why, right? It was like, I got to get the hell out of here. And so I ended up going, we weren't in a position, of course, to afford, one of, the fancier schools.
Kent boarding school.
What's that?
Kent.
Yeah, it wasn't.
That's where I wanted to go.
Kent boarding school? I mean, there was.
Canterbury.
Yeah, there was Deerfield there and Milton Academy and all these places. So I ended up going, I was not a practicing Catholic, but I ended up applying to Catholic Memorial and Boston College High School, both of which had great hockey programs, all boys schools, Jesuit, and ended up going to BC High. And so my parents put together a scratch to make that happen, and started anew, and made a bunch of great friends there, and had I think a profoundly different experience than I would have had I stuck it out. And who knows, maybe I should have stuck it out, I don't really know. But bringing it back full circle, when I went to college, I had deep anxiety about this starting over again thing, given what I had experienced. And so you get your letter and you open it up, and the person's name was Roy Cho, and obviously didn't know him from Adam, and was very nervous, and we had that pre-moving in call. And we spoke over the phone, and we realized we just had so much in common, whether it was, interest in the same rap music or athletics. So he was going to Brown to wrestle. So
you don't want to fuck with him.
So, dude, Roy, total badass, man. Amazing guy, Division I wrestler, brilliant, junior national team for Taekwondo, just a
badass.
A badass.
Smart badass.
Smart badass. So moving day, we had already got to know each other over the phone, but met, and it was just like, okay. It was like, I was so appreciative because it was just like relief. And not only did I find somebody that I ended up being roommates with 4 years in a row. We stayed together for 4 years, and to this day, he's my best friend.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. One of a few, but
yeah.
Incredible. And he also had this built-in group because he was on the wrestling team, right? So we already had his homies. And so I was adopted in, and, even the 125-pound wrestlers used to fuck with me so hard, man, It's like, I was not a small dude. I was into working out, and I was athletic, and I was probably, I'm 190 pounds now. I was 220 at my peak, I was not a small guy. And
Beast.
They used to just run circles around me, just shoot the legs, and it was all over. But between them and then, the other side of it was a bunch of football players. We're in this fraternity, Delta Tau. So joined that group, and that was one of the defining parts of my experience. It was like feeling welcomed into a group from day one. Felt like I had a network. So I was able to have fun, spend time with people, play sports, and really focus on academics. So overall, it was a great experience. I guess the last thing I would say is, heading into sophomore year, I was, I had this idea in my mind that my parents were working very, very hard to allow me to have this experience, and I really wanted to make the most of it. So I also, sophomore year, I picked up a second major, which was computer science, and I, started to learn how to write code and do problem sets and all those sorts of things. Really sort of interesting, critical thinking, solving problems. So looking back on it, I think I wanted to make the most of the experience that my parents were affording me, and I also just loved the idea of being.
Can you code now?
It's been a long time, but I think what I got from that was an approach to how to think about solving problems, number one. And number two, visualizing things that way. So like you can think about visualizing a problem like almost like through like writing code, and it's like a very different way of thinking about how to solve problems. So
I think that could be one of the most valuable things to learn today is writing code. I wish I knew how to write code.
Definitely plan on starting junior early on.
Code. Kids that write code get paid so much cash if they do it well.
The funny thing was I completely lacked the prescience to understand how valuable that kind of degree would be, right? It wasn't even on my radar, but overall it was a great experience.
So you graduate college and you step right into sort of investment banking?
Yeah. This was part of this, and again, somewhat an anathema to entrepreneurship. It was keep your head down, do work, keep moving along, and these things will open doors, irrespective of whether or not you really knew what door it would be or what would be on the other side.
When you got into investment banking and you started there, like, Were you excited? I mean, I'm sure you were excited, right? Because it's an interesting world to be in as a college graduate. You're surrounded by, potential opportunity in a real way. But were you thinking at that stage that this was going to be your future, or were you like, this is going to be a stepping stone to potentially own a business at some point?
I felt like it was a stepping stone to lots of things. It felt, based on what little I knew about the professional world more broadly, it seemed like one of those opportunities that opened a lot of doors for you, depending, there's
Opportunity.
There's a lot of, historically, you could look at objective data, lots of people did that and then went on to do lots of interesting things. Yeah, so it was, again, not a real sort of focus, lacked the clarity to understand where it would lead, but knew that it was going to create real optionality if I could excel in that way. So I was a summer analyst at Merrill between junior and senior year, and then took a full-time job after graduation.
So how was that experience?
I've been asked that a lot over the years, particularly because have hired a lot of people into our company, a lot of people that have come to like that fork in the road. Do I stay on that track, or do I stay on the consulting track, or do I do something more entrepreneurial, or do I follow my passion, or do I get into food, which is something I love? And what I say is, and have said in the past, if I were to go back, I would do that all over again, because it was really foundational. But it was less about finance. What I learned in investment banking at that particular moment in time, this was 2003. The year before I joined, Merrill Lynch had just laid off 25,000 people worldwide, so everything was shrinking, but there was no dearth of work to do. It was just a lot of pitching and a lot of work. So we were pretty regularly working 90 to 110-hour weeks, which is, if you break that down across 7 days, you're working a lot, right? Like mathematically, you're working a lot. You had this thing called the Bullpen. Everybody was in cubicles. It had a couple sofas and like a dining room table. And so, 1 or 2 nights a week you'd sleep there. They had thankfully, and it was one of the many things they offered in terms of resources, they had an amazing gym downstairs. So you'd bring a change of clothes, you'd sleep on the sofa for a couple hours, you go into the gym, you'd shower.
Is that still how it is?
I'm not as intimately familiar, but I believe it's changed a lot.
Can't imagine it being like that.
I think they've really changed, this sort of culture of, we went through it, you go through it too. I think it's changed pretty meaningfully.
So just for the people that are unfamiliar with what an investment banker is, actually.
Yeah.
Can you just break down what an investment banker is, just so we can all sort of understand what it is?
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, you're in the financial services industry, right? So it's a services business. You can perform a range of services on behalf of your clients, which are businesses. And that could be anything from you need to raise capital. It could be in the form of debt. It could be in the form of equity. It could be I'm raising private equity. It could be I'm taking a company public, an IPO. So it could be M&A. We're a business that is seeking to be shown. We want to be shown strategic opportunities because we want to buy another company or other companies, or we're looking to be sold or acquired.
On behalf of an individual or a business?
Yeah, on behalf of a business.
On behalf of a business.
So it's all those types of financially related transactional services.
And could be anything from buy, sell, acquire, merge.
All of the above. Yeah.
IPO.
Yeah.
You are essentially a broker.
Yeah.
For putting these deals together.
Exactly. And so you could be in the M&A group. So you could be in more of a product group like mergers and acquisitions, or you could be in an industry group where sort of you're verticalized based on. I was in global industries, so sort of a catch-all for all the industries that weren't captured in the more specific either consumer vertical, real estate vertical. So you had these verticals, and then you had global industries, which was everything else.
So there's in the world of financial services, there's investment bankers, there's wealth managers, right? That's more of an individual basis. That's so the banker is for the business, the wealth management is for the individuals for the most part.
Yep. Managing wealth, managing their capital.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's stockbrokers.
That's more in the wealth management, and then there's these. Investment banks, they have historically had, not always the case now, trading desks and sales desks. So they're trading debt, they're trading equity on behalf of clients. If there's a new issue, if you're putting out a new piece of debt or a new equity, they'll go out and they'll sell that to institutional investors, the Fidelities, the T. Rowe's of the world, so on and so forth. So there's multiple sort of components and groups within these banks, but that's
I think it's kind of fun just to break it down, because I feel like there's, like, you hear these terms and so many people don't have a clue what an investment banker is. You know what I mean? I didn't know what an investment banker is until I had to hire one.
Yeah, sure.
I had I was like, someone was like, oh, you should hire an investment banker, and I was like, for what?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
But so you were in there and you just saw doors.
Yeah, and so I the things I learned there, one, how to push yourself. Working 100 hours a week is not easy, and you have to give a lot up, so you're missing one of your closest friends' Saturday night birthday parties. You think maybe you'll get out at 11 o'clock and just finally get there, and you don't end up leaving Saturday night, and you're working straight through Sunday. So knowing that if you need to, you can work for 48 hours straight and just keep going, I think that's a really important thing to know about yourself as a human being. The other thing I learned, going back to an earlier conversation, when you're talking about your creative side, is attention to detail. So a very vivid memory of a particular senior associate, that I was with whom I was working. We were working on a particular pitch, and so these books, they could be 20 pages, 50, they could be 100 pages, and they're very, very iterative, right? And so you put together a framework or an outline, and then you're populating with content, and then you're iterating, and whether it's an associate or a VP, whoever you're working with, they're giving you red lines, they're giving you comments, and you're turning them over and over again before it's ready to present to
run a process.
To run a process to present to a client. And maybe it's not a process, maybe it's just a pitch. Maybe you're approaching a client saying, hey, we have an idea, we want to show you the services that we can provide you. And I remember this one associate, really, really bright guy, maniacal about detail orientation. It was like the 5th or the 6th page of like a 50-page pitch book. And the font size in the footnote on page 5 or 6 was like a half point off. So I think I want to say something like the font in the footnotes was 5 throughout the entire presentation, and this was 5.5 or 6.
I noticed it.
I don't know how he noticed it, but he noticed it. And it was like, okay, this is just a different level, because it was circled in red and it was like question mark font size, And it's like, wow, that's okay. That's that's a level, And if that's sort of like the high bar for attention to detail, that's something to learn from. So those were the two biggest takeaways. More than you learn the financial side of businesses. I think that's important. You learn how to model things out in Excel. That's a helpful skill. But those were the two things I think were the biggest takeaways from that experience.
And then you decided at some point. How long were you in investment banking?
A year and a half. So usually these analyst programs are two-year programs. So your first few months, you're like full-blown in training. So you don't get to touch any work. They have incredibly sophisticated companies that come in and they really train you everything from how to develop financial models and work in Excel to PowerPoints and so forth. And then you get into the work. And then, you're on an annual bonus cycle, right? And so I'm really not sure how it works now. I assume it may be similar, but your compensation as an analyst, I think as an investment banker in general, is heavily weighted towards bonus, right? And your bonus is entirely based on the performance of the business and your own personal performance. So everyone, if you're so inclined, your first year you're really focused on, and it's done on a scale, so they tier it, right? So not everyone can get top bonus. There's only so many that can get top, middle, and whatever. So I was really focused on that, again, competitive, wanted to excel. If you're going to do something well, do something, do it well. But I also, I definitely became depressed. I mean, I was a really, a person who likes to be in control, who doesn't like to be told what to do, to really not be in control of anything, including like how you spend a single minute of the day. That starts to wear on you, and not just giving up friends' birthdays, but parents want to come in to see you, can't see them, things like that. So I knew pretty early into that first year that it was not likely that I was going to make a full 2 years. And part of it was just like how I was feeling and knowing that was going to run its course. Yeah. And then the second thing was, again, because I feel like I'm someone who wants to control their own destiny and is seeking that freedom, I wanted to be in the game, and this is not a knock on the investment banking profession or the services that any type of broker can provide, because I think they're very valuable. But for me, that was not being in the game, not being on the other side of a trade or a transaction. So my next step was, how do I actually get to be one of the people that the bankers
You want excitement.
I want to be in the game. I want to be playing.
Yeah.
And I felt that, not in a pejorative way, was more refereeing. And I didn't want to be refereeing. I wanted to be playing. And so I after that first year's cycle, I call it, I went on the professional interviewing circuit, right? Which was, I didn't know exactly, again, what I wanted to do. I know I wanted to be in the game as opposed to refereeing, and then what does that look like? And so after the first year concluded, I continued to work and work hard, and I was very lucky to work for a small group of really great individuals that really took care of me, looked after me. So I started interviewing, and that's what led to my next professional opportunity.
And what was that?
So I went to work for a private equity firm, and I was interviewing at a bunch of different places. And what was really unique about this opportunity, they were hiring for what was called a private equity associate, so somebody who was in private equity. So you were in the game in the sense that you were making investments in businesses, and then you were either controlling or a non-controlling basis. You were sort of participating with the management teams, and you had real skin in the game because you were deploying capital, as opposed to getting a fee for a transaction. So this job was to be private equity associate, which is very common after you leave as an analyst in investment banking, but it was also to be one of the two co-founders' assistants. So it's sort of like a two-sided job.
And what kind of investments were they making? Like, what kind of business did they focus on?
So this was what we'd call a macro-driven fund. So they made a lot of investment decisions based on their point of view around where the world was going. At the time, they were doing a lot of energy investments. They were doing transportation investments, real estate investments. They were also doing a lot of distressed investments, turnaround businesses, and that's often how they found their way into new industries. Find something that's distressed, have no experience in that industry, and then get into that industry through that investment.
Kind of fun.
Yeah, and that's how I ended up getting into restaurants. So I took this opportunity because it was like, okay, this person who has co-founded this firm, who's a brilliant guy, has basically said to me, mentorship, something like, young man, mentorship is really hard to find these days in this business. Most firms that you're going to join, you're going to be one of many, sharks in the water, and you're going to look around and everyone's going to have the same scores and skills and capabilities that you do. What I'm offering you is real mentorship. You're going to
work for free.
It wasn't free, but there was a quid pro quo, which is I'm going to ask you to do whatever it is I need you to do, and you're going to do it. But I'm really going to invest in you, and that was not lip service. His name was Joe. He was an incredible mentor to me. Continues to be to this day, and we spent several years together. But the first 6 months that I joined the firm, he literally pushed a second desk into his office. He said, here's a notebook, and you're going to learn through osmosis, be on every phone call and just take notes. And so what he was willing to do is basically, attach a tube to his brain and just proactively download, at the time was 35 years of business experience.
Did you strategically want that for yourself through him, or was it something that he saw in you? How did you get yourself? I mean, I could see myself figuring out a way. If I flagged this guy, I think as a business person innately, I have ability to sort of flag certain people in a room that I want to engage at some level.
Yeah.
Did you have that with him, or was it he winged you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a conflict of things. One, he'll say this now, he said it then. I think he saw something in me, but he refers to it as I was a little rough around the edges, which couldn't have been more true.
Tough love.
Yeah, so he saw something in me, saw a lot of potential, but knew that there was a lot of shaping and crafting that needed to happen. And I mean, look, he was an incredibly charismatic and still is guy. He's a one of a kind. There are no two Joes in the world, and I felt like he was someone that I could really learn from. And it was also relative to, again, I was on this profession. I was professionally interviewing, so I was just going and meeting and talking to as many people as possible to understand what was out there. And this just stood out as a very atypical opportunity, right? Where someone was really, it wasn't just come in and get crushed. It was, yeah, you'll get crushed at times, but like, I'm really going to invest in you. And, you know, he did every bit of that and more.
So you work with him for a while. How the hell do you go from that? It's just like not an atypical story.
Yeah.
Going from that world and that sort of like that level of stepping stone into buying a distressed, although I can understand the distressed component because you ended up buying a bodybuilding business, like a bodybuilding food business.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I would totally appreciate now.
Yeah, right.
But tell me, I just want to hear that story.
So the short of it is, as I said before, we were in the distressed business. So I was staffed on a deal before the pump, and it was a distressed restaurant group based out of California. We bought the bonds out of bankruptcy. We took control of this business. It exited bankruptcy, and it was a parent company that controlled two very, very legacy, sort of old school, 3-day part family dining brands. One was called Coco's and one was called Caro's, West Coast based. And so I worked on that deal with another.
You did this with Joe, in Joe's company?
Yeah, this is in Joe's company. So while I was working at the
Joe's
firm.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked on that deal with a partner, another amazing guy who I learned a lot from. His name was Freddie. And what ended up happening, the business got worse before it got better. And so we ended up we made the decision to partner with management and really run the business collaboratively. And so we would fly out once a month for 2, 3, 4 days. We'd stay in San Diego, where they're headquartered, and we'd focus on blocking and tackling and just the fundamentals.
Of actually running that business?
Of actually running that business.
So you guys were almost incubating, or sort of, you were not only cash, but you were strategic money, smart money for this company.
And it wasn't even super strategic. We just saw a lot of mistakes, and so we said, okay, if we're just in the avoiding mistakes business, for example,
defense only.
Don't change half your menu without asking a single customer if they're interested in the new menu. Mm-hmm. Don't alienate them and then lose 30% of your sales in a year, right?
That happened.
Yes, that happened. So these are the things that were happening. We said, if we just don't do that and we just do things like, if we're gonna change stuff, ask people, like one step forward, one foot in front of the other, those types of things. So we found some folks there that were open to collaborating with us, because not every executive team is. We shuffled some things around in the management team, so to speak, and we just went back and forth once a month, and we were able to slowly but surely just sort of like turn that ship around until we finally had the opportunity in 2005 to sell that business and exit that transaction fairly successfully.
Wow.
So that was my first foray into the business side of restaurants and some exposure to operations.
By the way, I just want to mention, being in the restaurant business, it could be one of the hardest things to do, is to turn a ship. It's like turning the Titanic around when a restaurant is not doing what you want it to do.
It ain't a jet ski, right?
No.
It is not a jet ski.
No.
Yeah, you can't turn that thing on a dime.
No.
So that was a great experience. And what also was happening at the time, I was a person in my mid-20s living a certain way in observance of what my friends and peers, my brother and sister-in-law were doing from a food perspective. I knew the things that I was interested in and what I wanted to eat. My brother and sister-in-law, I remember, opening the freezer and seeing, Bell and Evans air-chilled chicken fingers, And so these things were starting to happen. And so what, again, going back to the idea of a macro thesis, what we said at the time was, hey, if we're going to continue to invest in restaurants, rather than find something that's old and legacy, that is really not the future, that has to be turned around, let's try and understand where the world is going, and let's invest in that direction from a food perspective. So we looked at it and we said, ostensibly, what had happened to grocery via Whole Foods starting in 1980 or 1981, it had been unfolding over several decades, hadn't happened to restaurant in the industry, but it was going to. Right? There was no reason why this was happening in the grocery aisle. It wasn't going to happen.
Healthy food.
Healthy food, right? And interestingly enough, they were similarly sized industries. Back then, they were both $600 or $650 billion industries, between restaurants, food service, and grocery. And so we thought we should be investing behind, restaurant brands that are focusing on healthy food. But back in 2005, 2006, many of the brands that we know today that have, very quickly become household names in terms of healthy food, they didn't exist.
Right.
There was nothing that existed back then, which goes to show you how quickly things happen when there's a real shift, right?
Which is really crazy to think about, actually.
It's crazy. That was not that long ago.
No. That
Yeah.
there was literally no household name restaurant that was actually focused on anything health and wellness oriented.
Think about that.
You know,
It's crazy. Yeah.
it is.
So we were like, okay, we're investors, but there's nothing really to buy or invest behind. The pump was in our backyard. It was 5 units. Husband and wife, incredible, passionate people. Spent 10 years building this thing.
Were they bodybuilders?
They were not. But Steve, fitness was an important part of his life. And he was just a really big believer in eating this way. He really was. I had also been a customer from my investment banking days. So when you were in investment banking, if you stayed past 7 or 8 o'clock, you got $20 or $25 stipend to order meals in, because you were going to be there till midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I would order from the pump, as an investment banker. So I knew it from back then. Protein shakes, egg white omelets, all the things.
Right, yeah.
And so we, in our maybe not so infinite wisdom, thought, hey, it's in our backyard, it's a small business. While this isn't exactly what we're talking about, like what could be so hard? Let's just kind of evolve it and reposition it, and we can grow it. So we looked at it and we said, okay, this is a good idea. And we worked on a deal with the founders and the owners. And then the operating partner with whom we were working to evaluate restaurant opportunities took another job. And so we were at the 10-yard line, 5-yard line, getting close to the goal line with this very small deal that we were evaluating the pump, and we suddenly had nobody to run the business. And, that's when, sort of Joe and I collectively raised my hand and said, parachute in for a year, get an office open, start to hire a team, get the business up and running. What you don't know, you'll figure out. And it'll be incredible experience for you as an operator that you can bring back, to your seat as an investor. And I thought, that sounds amazing. Sign me up. I was living that way. I was really into fitness and wellness. I was a consumer of theirs. And, back then they had an unbelievable cult following. I remember, like daily delivery to the Howard Stern show. And he always used to talk about it, right? And pictures of, Brooke Shields and Jerry Seinfeld up on the wall amongst all the bodybuilders, and these tiny 500 square foot restaurants that had lines out the door every day, right? And the reality was, this is not a knock. The food was not good. But there was a real lack of options back then.
Eva's and the pump.
And so Steve, one of the 2 founders of the pump, Steve and Elena, the husband and wife, Steve's family owned Eva's. That's where the pump came from.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that story.
Ostensibly, Eva's spawned the pump.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So your firm ends up taking on buys the whole entire company, or just buys a majority, or what?
Yeah, nearly a majority.
Okay, so nearly a majority.
I mean, nearly
the whole thing.
Yeah.
They're in for 5 to 7%.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And so you come in, you start operating, and
not good. It was
not good. Like, it was not good because you didn't feel like you were an operator, or not good because there was just a ton of shit that you didn't know how to do and you were like chasing your tail?
It was a lot of things. It was, we didn't quite have visibility on maybe all the things that we needed to have visibility on before we acquired the business.
Gotcha.
That was a challenge.
Yeah. Like super duper bad?
Yeah, just the recipes weren't exactly right when we found out what was in them. That was problematic. So this was in an age when nutritional disclosure was becoming a thing. 06, 07, 08. It was like, nutrition labels, people care what's in my food. We were supposed to be like the health food company.
Yeah.
So, problem. We called it the melting ice cubes. We were losing guests faster than we were keeping them because the operation was not sound, And so I think one of the things that when you have founders that are controlling a business that are so passionate and just like doing the work every day, one of the things that Steve was great at was promotion, and just like getting out there and just bringing new people in. But when we finally, got into the business, we learned, this was these restaurants that had like 150 menu items on them. It was total mayhem, and they were not sustainable.
And typically, you know what I've learned also, and myself being a great example of this is, you know, the founder, you know, a guy like me who's really passionate about doing a lot of things, like specifically when I launch a business, like I'm so in. I'm like, I am a creative entrepreneur, but I also am an operator. I mean, I operated as a technician for many more years than I actually have owned restaurants.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm doing things, and I've gotten a lot better at it now, but when I'm doing things, I forget to show other people how to do them.
Yep. Yep.
You know?
Indeed.
Yeah.
You know, then the third thing, which is probably the biggest and the hardest lesson, is I think the combination of a little bit of hubris and feeling like we knew better or could do it better than the founders, right? Like, how hard would it be to just reposition the business? You know, that was more bodybuilding. The world was headed in this direction, and we really didn't understand both how challenging that would be, and really how significant the shift from eating that way to eating what let's call whole foods, or sort of omnivore's dilemma, Michael Pollan, Alice Waters type food. And so we were just, I think we were cavalier and inexperienced in understanding sort of that shift and that evolution. We just figured, oh, what could be so hard? It turns out very hard. So within the first year, we discovered all these things, and it was really a fork in the road, which was call it a day and go back with our tail between our legs, or embrace the thesis, which not only remained intact in terms of this idea of healthy eating, it was strengthening. You know, every day it seemed to be more validated that this is where the world was heading in terms of eating food, but we would have much more work on our hands than we thought.
What year was this?
This was in 2008. 2007.
Scary year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you also had the macro backdrop, which is like the world was falling apart, you know? So
People wanted to eat donuts and fucking...
Oh, dude, and this was just one of those moments where you definitely figure out what you're made of, you know? I mean, there were several moments when it was very dark. I mean, I remember getting, you know, on 2 occasions calls, which was, you know, there's no more money, we're shutting down the business. One of them, I actually left work and met now my wife, at the time my girlfriend, and we just went out to lunch and had cocktails because I just was like, I can't believe this is the end, you know? But, you know, woke up the next day, you know, sort of fought my way, you know, out of that situation, begged and pleaded, you know, we're not done yet, we can figure this out, we can solve it. And, you know, that's really, you know, when the journey started, you know, one and a half plus years in, it was, okay, we have to basically start over. We really believe in this opportunity. We have a lot to learn, but we can do this. And, you know, the next, call it 8 or 9 years, is how we've gotten from where we were to where we are today.
Man, what a sensational story, dude. It's like one of those things where, like, you know, a guy like you buys a brand like The Pump, and to see where it was, to know that The Pump evolved into Dig In actually makes sense. Like, I could see it. No problem, I could see it. But then having to take on the guys in the suits and being like, trying to explain that that the future is what you have created, which is actually accurate.
Yeah.
From, you know, an egg whites and protein shake spot.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I mean, that's insane, you know?
Yeah. It's been a journey.
Dude. And so how many units now?
So I think we just broke through 30. So we've got a few more to open by the end of this year. So we'll end up somewhere in the low to mid 30s.
And you're in New York,
Boston. We're opening Philadelphia,
Philly.
Next month, and we have one suburban location in Westchester, in Rye Ridge. And next year, looks like based on leases we're signing now, we'll be headed to 2 more markets in addition. So by the end of next year, we should have somewhere in the, you know, call it 45 plus range, and in 5 cities. And we have a few different really exciting now coals in the fire, given how we've grown the business and how we've really been able to think about what's our reason for being, what's our mission, like what are we here to do besides just like building a company. You know, our mission, this idea of rebuilding the food system and really learning over the last 8 years that fundamentally the way to do that is to do that through vegetables, and that, ecologically, from a sustainability perspective, from a cost perspective, from an access perspective, from a nutrition perspective, that they're really, really, really powerful. That's where we've placed our bet. And so going forward, really, we think about not just scaling quote unquote fast casual or fine fast restaurants as a chain, but we think about it more holistically as we've been building a platform over the last 8 years that supports growing and cooking real food, predominantly vegetables, and whether we serve that to you in a fast casual restaurant environment, whether we deliver that to you, through some type of delivery service, catering, whether we offer something more experiential like a full service, where we'll open our first full service restaurant later this year in the West Village. Everything is now through the filter and the lens of, does this support rebuilding the food system? Does it support doing it through vegetables? Is it built on a platform of growing and cooking food, and supporting the people behind those two things? And so we feel like we're just getting started, which is a little bit cliched, but you hear that a lot. But relative to what we believe, the opportunity not just to grow a business and a brand and a culture, but the opportunity to have impact on the food system at large. There's a lot of work, and we think we can do this. We can be doing this work for decades to come.
My man. Inspirational. I don't know how else to sum that up. That sounds like an incredible mission. And I don't think I know that you're on your way there. I'm at Dig In often.
Yeah.
It's my, and I'm like I think people would put me in a poster boy sort of vibe for this style of food that you guys serve there. It's what I do, and I believe in what you guys do. So I'm going to ask you the question.
Yeah.
We're here at the finish line. Are you a born or made guy?
Yeah, I don't know if this is going against the grain or the rules or.
Can't say both. You can say whatever you want, man. I'm not gonna tell you no.
I'll tell you, I fundamentally believe that it is a combination. If I were to lean, I would lean absolutely more towards made than born. Because I believe we as humans. Particularly in this country, we have the opportunity to make choices, and I feel like I've been given a lot. So born, not just whether it's raw material or makeup, but I also believe I was born into a very fortunate situation that when you think about the opportunities that 8 or 9 billion people across the globe have, not everybody was afforded what I was given. My parents, sort of like what they offered me, sort of how intact my home life was, the support I got, the willingness the willingness they had to just sort of push and support. So that is, I think, a big part of the born equation for me. But the other side of it is I'm a really big believer in hard work and not giving up. Like I and we at Dig at this point, from a values perspective, truly believe anything is possible. We're not putting somebody on the moon, but we think anything is possible, and that's how we wake up and go to work every day. It's if there's a problem to be solved, we think we can figure out a way to solve it. And so there's a resiliency to our culture that we also look for when we're thinking about hiring and recruiting people. And I think a lot of that does boil down to just being willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work, And so I think for anybody, watching, listening, or just like thinking about being on that path, it is a combination, but I lean heavily into made because if you do the work and you don't give up and you're really committed, I think we're a good example that going from where we came from to where we are now, anything's possible. And if you were a betting person, 11 years ago when we started on this journey with the pump, I don't think it would have been probable that we would have ended up where we are today and where we're going. And it's only for a bunch of really talented, hardworking, committed people that wanted to make this thing a reality,
I like it.
Yeah, man.
Adam, thank you, man.
Thank you, brother.
If you have not been to Dig, you must go. I'm so excited about the restaurant, too.
Yeah.
I'm so fucking excited about the restaurant. Anyway, man, thank you so much. This has been a blast, and I think we got a lot of good stuff here. And I love to leave a few things just with the people listening. I think one thing that I really pulled out, and you said it was somewhat of a thread throughout your story, you know, if you're gonna do something, do it well.
Yep.
And I think that is so simple, almost common sense, and overlooked far too often.
Yep.
So, if you're gonna do one thing, do it well. If anybody knows how to do that, it's this man right here. Thank you, man.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Really enjoyed it.